The courtroom was busy that Monday morning. People talked in low voices as they waited for the judge to arrive. It was a normal day in family court, where sad stories were common. But nobody knew that today would be different. 12-year-old Ethan Morgan sat next to his father, James. The boy was small for his age, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that seemed too serious for a child. He wore a blue button-up shirt that his grandmother had ironed specially for court. His hands kept fidgeting with the sleeve buttons. "Sit still," his father whispered. James Morgan looked tired. At 42, the years of raising Ethan alone had left lines around his eyes. He worked 2 jobs to support them, and this custody hearing was taking time he couldn't afford to lose. Ethan's grandmother, Ruth, sat on his other side. She had raised him while James worked, teaching him to read, making his lunches, bandaging his scrapes. She reached over and patted his hand gently. "All rise," the court officer announced. Everyone stood as Judge Catherine Bennett entered the courtroom. She was in her early 40s, with brown hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her black robe moved around her as she walked to the bench. Her face was serious but kind. "Please be seated," she said, her voice clear and strong. As people sat down, Ethan kept standing. His eyes were fixed on the judge's face. Something had changed in his expression. "Young man, you may sit down," Judge Bennett said, looking directly at him. But Ethan didn't move. His hand went to his pocket, where he kept a small, folded photograph. It was old and worn at the edges from being handled so often. In the photo, a young woman smiled at the camera, holding a baby. Ethan had found the picture in his grandmother's old photo album when he was 8. When he asked who the woman was, his grandmother quickly took the album away. But Ethan had already slipped the photo into his pocket. For 4 years, he kept it hidden, studying the woman's face, wondering. "Ethan, sit down," his father hissed, pulling at his sleeve. But Ethan stepped forward instead. The courtroom, which had been filled with small noises, papers rustling, chairs creaking, people whispering, grew quiet. "You are my mother," Ethan said clearly. His words fell into absolute silence. It was as if everyone had stopped breathing at the same moment. Judge Bennett's face went pale. She gripped the edge of the bench. For a second, her professional mask slipped, and raw emotion showed in her eyes. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan pulled out the photograph and held it up. "This is you," he said. "With me, when I was a baby." James jumped to his feet. "Ethan, stop this right now." The court officer stepped forward, unsure what to do. The lawyers looked at each other in confusion. Judge Bennett stared at the photograph, then at Ethan's face. The resemblance was suddenly clear to everyone in the room, the same determined chin, the same shape of the eyes. "Court is in recess," she said, her voice shaking slightly. She stood up quickly and disappeared through the door behind the bench. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. James grabbed Ethan by the shoulders. "What have you done?" he demanded. Ethan looked up at his father, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "She's the woman in the picture," he said simply. "I've always known." As court officials rushed around and people talked excitedly, Ethan stood very still. After years of wondering, years of questions no one would answer, he had found her. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Judge Catherine Bennett sat in her private chambers, her hands shaking. She had removed her black robe and hung it carefully on the hook behind the door. Now she just looked like any woman in a simple gray suit, not the powerful family court judge everyone respected. "How did this happen?" she whispered to herself. She picked up the phone on her desk 3 times, and 3 times she put it back down. Who could she call? What could she say? The boy in her courtroom, Ethan Morgan, was her son, the son she had not seen in 10 years. Catherine walked to the window and looked out at the city. Tall buildings reached toward the sky, and tiny cars moved below. Her mind went back to a different time, when she was not Judge Bennett but just Katie, a 24-year-old law student with big dreams and a baby she couldn't raise. She had met James Morgan during her first year of college. He was handsome and funny, working at his father's construction company. Their love was quick and deep. But when she got pregnant, everything changed. "I have to finish law school," she had told James one night as they sat in their small apartment. Baby Ethan was just 3 months old, sleeping in his crib beside them. "I can't be a mother right now." James had looked at her with angry, sad eyes. So you're just going to leave us? Not forever, Catherine had promised. Just until I finish school and get started in my career. Then I'll come back. But she hadn't come back. Law school turned into a job at a big firm. The job turned into a career. Years passed. She sent money every month, but James returned the checks. She sent birthday cards, but they came back unopened. Eventually, she stopped trying. As her career grew, so did the hole in her heart. Each time she ruled on a family case, she thought about her own broken family. When she became a judge at 36, she promised herself she would be fair to all parents, knowing how complicated family life could be. Now, Catherine opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small photo album. Inside were pictures of a baby boy, Ethan at birth, Ethan at 1 month, Ethan at 2 months. The pictures stopped after that. She had nothing of him beyond his infancy. A knock on the door made her quickly put the album away. "Come in," she said, trying to sound normal. Her clerk, David, entered with a concerned face. "Judge Bennett, there's quite a situation out there. The court administrator wants to speak with you." Catherine nodded. "Tell her I'll be out in 5 minutes." When David left, Catherine took a deep breath. She knew what would happen next. She would be removed from the case. There would be an investigation. Her career, which she had worked so hard to build, might. The news spread through the courthouse like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone knew about the boy who had recognized Judge Bennett as his mother. Phones rang constantly. Reporters gathered outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the judge or the boy. In a small meeting room on the 3rd floor, Ethan sat with Mrs. Parker, a kind-faced social worker with gray hair and gentle eyes. She had been called in immediately after the morning's events. "Ethan, can you tell me how you knew Judge Bennett was your mother?" Mrs. Parker asked, keeping her voice soft and friendly. Ethan looked down at his hands. "The picture," he said simply. "I found it 4 years ago in Grandma Ruth's old photo box. I was looking for baseball cards she said might be in there." Mrs. Parker nodded, writing notes. "And what did you do when you found it?" "I asked Grandma who the woman was," Ethan continued. "She got really upset and took the box away, but I already had the picture in my pocket." In another room down the hall, James Morgan spoke with Mr. Wilson, the court investigator. Unlike Mrs. Parker, Mr. Wilson was not gentle. His questions were direct and his face showed no emotion. "Did you know Judge Bennett would be presiding over your case?" Mr. Wilson asked, staring hard at James. "No," James said forcefully. "How would I know which judge we get? This is crazy. I haven't spoken to Catherine in 10 years. "That's Judge Bennett to you," Mr. Wilson corrected. "And it seems very strange that your son immediately recognized her." James ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I didn't even know he had that picture. I never showed him photos of her. I never talked about her." Meanwhile, in the court administrator's office, Judge Bennett sat across from Mrs. Lee, a serious woman who had run the county courts for 15 years. "You should have checked the cases assigned to you," Mrs. Lee said, her tone sharp with disappointment. "The name Morgan didn't ring any bells?" Catherine's face was pale. "It's a common name, and the case file only listed him as J. Morgan. I had no idea." "This is a serious matter, Catherine," Mrs. Lee continued. "People will question every family case you've ever ruled on. They'll wonder if you had hidden connections to other families too." "I've always been fair," Catherine insisted. "My personal life never affected my judgments." Mrs. Lee shook her head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is how this looks." By mid-afternoon, all 3 investigations were happening at once. Court officials reviewed Judge Bennett's case history. Social workers interviewed Ethan about his home life. Reporters dug into the past, trying to piece together the story of the judge and the family she left behind. In the courthouse cafeteria, 2 clerks whispered over coffee. "I heard she abandoned them to become a lawyer," one said. "I heard the father kept the boy from her on purpose," replied the other. Nobody knew the full truth yet. Only pieces existed, scattered among different people. Back in the small meeting room, Mrs. Parker finished her interview with Ethan. James Morgan sat alone on the bench outside the courthouse. The evening was growing cold, but he didn't notice. His mind was too full of the day's events. People walked past him, some giving curious looks. By now, his face had appeared on the local news. Everyone knew who he was. "Mr. Morgan." A reporter approached, notebook in hand. "Could I ask you a few questions about Judge Bennett and your son?" "Go away," James said, not looking up. No comment. After the reporter left, James closed his eyes. For 10 years, he had told himself that he was protecting Ethan. "Your mother left us to chase her career," he would say on the rare occasions when Ethan asked about her. "She chose law books over you." But was that the whole truth? James remembered the night Catherine had left. Ethan was only 2 months old. She had packed a small suitcase, kissed the sleeping baby, and turned to James with tears in her eyes. "I'll call every day," she had promised. "I'll visit on weekends. When I finish law school, we can be a real family." For a few months, she had kept her word. She called every night to ask about Ethan. She came home on weekends, holding him, singing to him. But James had been angry. He answered her calls with short, cold responses. When she visited, he found reasons to be out of the house. "You can't have it both ways, Katie," he had told her one weekend. "You can't be a part-time mother. Either you're here with us, or you're not." Over time, her calls became less frequent. Her visits stopped. James told himself it proved what he had suspected all along. She didn't really care about them. He started returning her checks. He moved without telling her their new address. When his mother, Ruth, suggested reaching out to Catherine, he had refused. "She made her choice," he said firmly. "We don't need her." Now, sitting outside the courthouse, James wondered if he had made the choice for her. Had he pushed her away? Had his pride kept Ethan from his mother? His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Ruth. "How's Ethan?" she asked immediately. "He's still with the social workers," James replied. "They're being thorough." There was a pause. "James," Ruth said finally, "I need to tell you something. I've kept quiet too long." James felt a knot form in his stomach. "What is it, Mom?" "Catherine sent letters," Ruth admitted. "For years. She sent them to my address after you moved. Birthday cards for Ethan, updates about her life." James gripped the phone tighter. "What? You never told me." "You were so angry, so hurt," Ruth explained. "I thought I was protecting you both, but now I see I was wrong. Ethan deserved to know his mother wanted to be in his life." James felt like he'd been punched. All these years, he had believed his own story, that Catherine had abandoned them completely. He had made her into a villain in his mind, and he had passed that story on to Ethan. "What did the letters say?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That she missed him, that she thought about him every day, that she hoped someday he would let her back into his life." James ended the call and put his head in his hands. The truth was painful. He had kept mother and son apart out of pride and hurt. Now, his son had found her anyway. A court officer came outside. "Mr. Morgan, your son is ready to go home now." James stood up, feeling the weight of 10 years of decisions on his shoulders. As he walked back into the courthouse, he knew things had to change. For Ethan's sake, he would have to face the truth and help his son understand it too. The story he had told for so long was crumbling. It was time to build a new one. 3 days after the courtroom incident, Ethan sat in a bright room at the Family Services Center. The walls were painted yellow, and colorful pictures hung everywhere. In one corner, there were toys for younger children. Ethan thought it looked like his elementary school, not a place for important meetings. Mrs. Parker, the social worker, sat in a chair nearby. "Are you nervous?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded. His hands were sweating, and his stomach felt tight. "What if she doesn't like me?" he whispered. "Just be yourself," Mrs. Parker said. "That's all anyone can ask." The door opened, and Judge Catherine Bennett walked in. She wasn't wearing her black robe today. Instead, she had on blue jeans and a simple white blouse. Without her judge's clothes, she looked smaller, more like a regular person. Ethan noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Hello, Ethan," she said. Her voice was softer than it had been in the courtroom. "Hi," Ethan replied. He didn't know whether to call her Judge or Ms. Bennett or something else. Mrs. Parker stood up. "I'll be right outside if either of you needs me. Take your time." When the door closed, Catherine sat down across from Ethan. For a long moment, neither spoke. They just looked at each other, seeing their own features reflected back, the same shaped eyes, the same chin, the same way of tilting their head slightly when thinking. "I've missed so much," Catherine finally said. You were so small when I last saw you. Dad said you left because you didn't want to be a mom, Ethan said directly. Catherine winced at his words. That's not true, Ethan. I never stopped wanting to be your mom. I made mistakes. Big ones. What kind of mistakes? Catherine took a deep breath. I thought I could have everything, be a mother and finish school and become a lawyer. I thought I could leave for a little while and then come back, but your father was very hurt, and as time passed, it got harder to find a way back to you. Ethan considered this. Did you ever try to see me? Yes, Catherine said. I sent letters and cards. I called. But after a while, the letters came back unopened. The phone number was changed. Ethan remembered his grandmother's confession to his father, which he had overheard the night before. Grandma kept some of your letters, he said. Dad didn't know. They talked more, slowly finding their way through 10 years of separation. Catherine learned that Ethan loved space and wanted to be an astronomer someday. He had a collection of rocks and minerals that he kept carefully labeled. He was good at science but struggled with math. Ethan learned that his mother had worked very hard to become a judge. She lived alone in an apartment with a cat named Oliver. She liked to hike on weekends and read mystery books. Do you have any questions for me? Catherine asked after they had been talking for almost an hour. Ethan had many questions, but one was most important. Will I see you again after today? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I hope so, very much. But there are complicated legal things that need to be worked out first. Because you're a judge. Yes, and because your father and I need to find a way to share you fairly. Ethan nodded. Then, hesitantly, he asked, Can I hug you before I go? Catherine's face softened. I'd like that very much. As they hugged for the first time in 10 years, something that had been broken began to heal. It wasn't fixed, not yet, but it was a start. For both mother and son, it felt like finding a missing piece of themselves that they hadn't fully realized was gone. When Mrs. Parker came back in, she found them looking at pictures on Catherine's phone. Ethan showing her his science fair project from last year, both smiling through tears. 2 weeks after Ethan's first meeting with Catherine, the new custody hearing began. This time, Judge Wilson presided, an older man with thick glasses and a reputation for being strict but fair. The courthouse was packed. News of the case had spread, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Reporters filled the back rows. Court officers stood at the doors, keeping order. Ethan sat between his father and grandmother. He wore a new shirt that his father had bought for the occasion. Across the aisle sat Catherine, looking nervous in a simple gray dress. She was not Judge Bennett today, just a mother fighting for her child. All rise, called the court officer as Judge Wilson entered. After everyone was seated, the judge looked around the courtroom. This is not a circus, he said firmly. This is a family matter. Anyone who disturbs these proceedings will be removed immediately. James Morgan's lawyer spoke first. Mr. Davis was tall and confident, with a loud voice that filled the room. Your Honor, Ms. Bennett abandoned her child 10 years ago to pursue her career, he said. She chose to put her ambitions above her son. Now that she has achieved success, she suddenly wants to be a mother again. The motherhood is not a part-time job you can quit and restart when it's convenient. Catherine's lawyer, Ms. Chen, was smaller but equally strong in her arguments. Your Honor, my client never abandoned her son. She made the difficult choice to finish her education so she could provide a better life for her family. She tried repeatedly to maintain contact with Ethan, sending letters, making calls, and providing financial support, all of which Mr. Morgan rejected. For hours, both sides presented their cases. James testified about raising Ethan alone, working 2 jobs to support him, never missing a school event or doctor's appointment. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every scraped knee, he said, his voice breaking. Where was she? When Catherine took the stand, she spoke clearly despite her tears. I made a terrible mistake in how I handled things, she admitted. I should have fought harder to stay in Ethan's life, but I never stopped loving him or wanting to be his mother. Ruth Morgan's testimony surprised everyone. She spoke about the letters she had hidden from her son, about Catherine's attempts to stay connected to Ethan. I thought I was protecting my son and grandson, the older woman said. Now I see I was wrong. I took away Ethan's chance to know his mother. Through it all, Ethan watched quietly. Sometimes he looked at his father, sometimes at the mother he was just getting to know. The adults were fighting over him, but no one seemed to be asking what he wanted. Finally, Judge Wilson turned to Ethan. "Young man, would you be willing to tell the court your thoughts on this matter?" Ethan stood, his legs shaking slightly. The courtroom went silent. Everyone leaned forward to hear what the boy would say. "I love my dad," Ethan began. "He's always taken care of me, but I want to know my mom too. I just found her. I don't want to lose her again." He looked from his father to Catherine. "Why can't I have both of you? Other kids have two parents who live in different houses. Why can't I?" Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Ethan. You may sit down." The judge then addressed the courtroom. "This is not about punishing anyone for past mistakes. This is about what's best for Ethan going forward. Both parents clearly love their son. Both want to be part of his life." He called the lawyers to his bench for a private conversation. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as people wondered what would happen next. Judge Wilson raised his hand for silence. "We will continue this hearing tomorrow. In the meantime, I strongly encourage both parties to consider whether this battle is truly in their son's best interest." As everyone filed out, Ethan looked back and forth between his parents. For the first time, he saw something new in both their faces, not just anger or hurt, but the beginning of understanding. The morning newspaper carried the story on its front page. Judge and son reunited in dramatic courtroom scene. Below was a photo of the courthouse, with smaller pictures of Catherine and James from older news stories. Thankfully, no photos of Ethan had been published. The court had protected his privacy as a minor. In the small coffee shop across from the courthouse, people couldn't stop talking about it. "I heard she left him when he was just a baby," said one woman to her friend. "What kind of mother does that?" "Maybe she had no choice," her friend replied. "It's not easy being a single mother and going to law school." All across town, similar conversations were happening. The story had divided the community. Some people supported Catherine, seeing her as a woman who made hard choices to build a better future. Others condemned her, saying no career was worth abandoning a child. At West Side Middle School, Ethan walked down the hallway with his head down. He could feel everyone watching him. Yesterday, he had been just another 7th grader. Today, he was famous. "Is it true your mom is a judge?" asked Tyler, a boy from his math class. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "That's so cool." Tyler said, "My mom works at the grocery store." But not all reactions were positive. At lunch, Ethan sat alone until his friend Miguel joined him. "Everyone's talking about you," Miguel said. "Jenny Harris said her mom thinks your mom should lose her job." Ethan poked at his food. "It's weird. Everyone has opinions about my family now." After school, Ethan found his grandmother waiting for him instead of his dad. "Your father had to meet with his lawyer," she explained as they drove home. "There were protesters outside the courthouse today." "Protesters?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Why?" Ruth sighed. "Some people are upset that a family court judge gave up her own child. They think she should step down. Others are there supporting her." When they got home, Ruth turned on the TV. A news report showed people holding signs outside the courthouse. Some signs read, "Mothers belong with their children," and "Step down, Judge Bennett." Others said, "Support working mothers," and "Family reunification now." The reporter interviewed a woman from a group called Mothers United. Judge Bennett's story is the story of many women who have to make impossible choices between career and family, she said. "Instead of judging her, we should create a society where mothers don't have to choose." Then the camera moved to a man from a group called Traditional Family Values. "Someone who abandoned her own child has no business deciding the fate of other families in court," he argued. "How can parents trust her judgment?" Ruth turned off the TV. "Too much noise," she said. "None of these people know what really happened. They weren't there." That evening, Catherine sat in her apartment, looking at the same news reports. Her phone kept ringing with calls from friends, colleagues, and reporters. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened her laptop and began to write an email to the court administrator. After 10 years as a judge, she loved her job, but now she had to think about what was best for Ethan and for herself as his mother. Meanwhile, James sat in his lawyer's office, considering the judge's words from that afternoon. Was this legal battle really in Ethan's best interest, or was it about his own hurt feelings? For the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember Catherine as she had been when they first met, young, passionate, determined to make a difference in the world. Those were the qualities he had fallen in love with. Those were the qualities that might make her a good mother to Ethan now. As night fell on the town, 3 people in 3 different places thought about the same thing: how to build a family from broken pieces. None of them had answers yet, but for Ethan's sake, they needed to find them soon. 3 months had passed since that fateful day in court when Ethan recognized his mother. It was now a warm spring day, with flowers blooming in the park where families gathered for Westside Middle School's graduation ceremony. Chairs were set up in neat rows facing a small stage. Parents chatted excitedly, cameras ready to capture their children's big moment. Among them sat James Morgan, looking uncomfortable in a tie that Ruth had insisted he wear. "Is she coming?" Ruth asked, glancing around. "She said she would," James replied. He checked his watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Just then, Catherine appeared, walking quickly toward them. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small wrapped gift. She looked different now. The formal judge was gone, replaced by a woman who smiled more often. "Sorry I'm late," she said, slightly out of breath. The meeting with the law school ran longer than expected. James nodded stiffly. "You didn't miss anything. It hasn't started yet." Ruth patted the empty chair beside her. "Sit here, Catherine. You'll have a good view of the stage." The 3 adults sat together awkwardly. 3 months ago, this scene would have been impossible. Now they were trying, for Ethan's sake. The court case had ended not with a judge's ruling, but with an agreement. After many difficult conversations, James and Catherine had found a way forward. Catherine would have Ethan on weekends and some weekdays. James would remain his primary caregiver. Both parents would make important decisions together. To make this work, Catherine had made a big change. She had stepped down from her position as a family court judge, choosing instead to teach law at the local university. "I spent 10 years helping other families," she had explained to Ethan. "Now it's time to focus on ours." The ceremony began with the school band playing. Then, one by one, students walked across the stage as their names were called. When the principal announced Ethan Morgan, 3 people stood up together, clapping loudly. Ethan crossed the stage with a wide smile. He looked different too. Taller, more confident. He waved at his family before joining his classmates. After the ceremony, Ethan found them waiting by the refreshment table. "I'm so proud of you," Catherine said, handing him the gift. "Thanks, Mom," Ethan replied. The word still felt new on his tongue. He opened the present to find a telescope. "Wow, this is amazing." "For our stargazing nights," Catherine explained. "You said you wanted to be an astronomer." James put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Good job today, son." As they walked toward the parking lot, a reporter approached them. The story had faded from the headlines, but people still recognized them. "Could I get a quick family photo for the local paper?" she asked. A nice ending to the story that captured everyone's attention. James and Catherine exchanged looks. Then James nodded. "One photo, that's it." They stood together, James, Ethan, Catherine, and Ruth, a family unlike most, but a family nonetheless. Later that evening, Ethan sat on the back porch of his father's house, setting up his new telescope. Catherine sat nearby, reading the instruction manual. James brought out glasses of lemonade for everyone. "You know," Ruth said, watching them, "life takes strange turns. I never thought I'd see the 3 of you together like this." "It's not perfect," James admitted. "We're still figuring things out." Catherine nodded. "One day at a time." Ethan looked up from his telescope. "I found Jupiter," he exclaimed. "Come look." One by one, they took turns peering through the telescope at the distant planet. As Ethan explained about Jupiter's moons, his face glowed with excitement. His parents exchanged small smiles over his head. The court case was over. The newspaper stories had stopped. The protests had ended. What remained was this: a boy and his parents, learning to be a family in their own imperfect way. It wasn't the family any of them had imagined, but as they stood together under the night sky, it felt right. Not an ending, but a beginning.